Hello and welcome back to part 3 in this tutorial. In this video we're going to be looking at Beamable. So I did explain a little bit about Beamable in the introduction video, but just to remind you, if you want to use the ZBD API, you have an API key and you basically have a REST API. So you make calls to the REST API, such as send Bitcoin to a player using your API key. You cannot do this from your game for two reasons, or for many reasons, but two main reasons. One is it would require you to put your API key in the game, which means that a player could decompile it, get the API key, and basically control your game and send all the Bitcoin to themselves. The other reason is that you don't want to have too much of that logic in the game itself. Game developers will use a backend, a server for the game. Many game developers will use something like PlayFab or Firebase, which is kind of like a microservice serverlite. They require you to kind of write scripts inside a Firebase or PlayFab website, which is limited and kind of a bit of a pain because you have kind of two separate code bases. Other developers who have a server or backend engineer will, write their own backend server in a language such as Node.js or Python or something like that. However, it does require that a developer who can do that, as well as you have to manage your own infrastructure. You have to host your own server, making sure your server is secure, making sure your firewall's secure, which is fine if you have those resources, but most likely you're a game developer who just wants to focus on the game and just wants the backend to work. This is why we recommend Beamable, which is more akin to the services like PlayFab and Firebase. So this is Beamable. You can go on the website and read about it. The good thing about Beamable is you can write your backend code in the same code base as your Unity C# game code, and when your game is built, that code is not included in your build, and that's kind of pushed up and run on Beamable's server. So it can be a little bit of a learning curve in the beginning, but ultimately it's a great choice for game developers who don't have their own backend engineer. So I'm going to head to the website. I'm just going to log in. So you will need to make an account. I'm just going to log in with my account here. And once I've logged in, you probably won't have as many games as me. You'll just have like one demo project, but you want to make a new project. So I'm going to create a new project, and let's call this Flappy BTC. There we go. And the way that Beamable works, it gives you, they call them realms, but you basically have a dev, a staging, and a production. If you're not familiar with kind of backend server coding, it's very common to have at least a dev or a production. But basically, the code in your production realm, or more generally, we say the production server it's basically tested code which doesn't have any bugs. But say you want to add a new feature to your game, you would obviously add that in dev, and you'd have versions of the game which only connect to the dev server, so it would not affect the live game. And then when you're happy and it's passed, you would push that to staging, which is kind of you're testing with some players or maybe an internal testing team. And once you're happy with that, you would push it to production. For this purpose, we're just going to stick to production for now. But it's good practice to start with dev. And Beamable, gives you a bunch of stuff. The main feature we're going to be using in Beamable is what we call microservices. But this will make a little bit more sense once we actually import the ZBD template code into our project. So let's head over to our project. We also need to install the Beamable SDK in Unity. So this is a project. It's kind of Flappy Bird clone. Fairly simple. Press play and tap the screen to avoid the pipes. I'm not doing very well, but you get the gist. Very simple game there. And the first thing we want to do is basically install the Beamable SDK. So I would just head over I would Google Beamable Unity SDK, make sure I get the latest version. I would actually recommend watching this video. I would actually recommend watching this video on installing Beamable because I don't want to go through all the steps in this. So I'll watch this video, go through the tutorials here, but I just want to grab the Beamable SDK installer package. One thing to note that for Beamable to work, you will need to install Docker on your computer. Docker can be quite daunting for developers who have not done much development outside of Unity, but Docker is probably the most popular. It says here the number one most used developer tool. And I guess what kind of Docker does is it kind of lets you run virtual machines that run kind of apps or server code without, in a kind of abstracted way. What that means for Beamable's use case is that we basically are writing server code in our Unity project, like a backend to power our game, but that has to run on a server. So obviously that can run on, when you push to production, this will run on Beamable's cloud server, but when you're actually developing locally, we want it to run locally on the computer, just for ease of development. We don't have to keep pushing code up to the cloud. So it'll actually run on a Beamable server virtual machine in Docker, and that's why they use Docker. So download Docker for your operating system and make sure that is running. Yep, I think my Docker is running here, so that's all good. So make sure you have Docker installed. Okay, next I'm going to import the Beamable package. So here we go. Click import. And then in the inspector, I should have this option, install Beamable SDK. So I'm going to press that. If this option isn't shown, you can find it going into Beamable Installer Editor and clicking on the README here. Once that's installed, it'll say something about importing a scoped registry. Just click OK, close. It'll show the project setting as well. I'll just close that. Now it'll give you these two options, open toolbox and remove the installer. You can remove the installer, doesn't really make a difference. It just gets less stuff in your code. So I'm just going to open toolbox, and I want to sign into an existing organization. So I've already made an account on the website. So I just want to sign in here with my Beamable details. So I'll do that now. Once I'm signed in, I want to select my project, my game, which is this one here, and then press confirm. Great, so now we are logged in. Not a lot to look at the moment. We don't have any microservices or code written. We'll get to that once we import the ZBD template. But just want to click on microservices. This is the main tab we're going to be using. And also I just want to clear out any errors that were shown on the import. Anyway, that's basically getting started with installing Beamable. Pretty simple. In the next video, we're going to look at actually importing the ZBD template, which will turn our Flappy Bird game into an actual Bitcoin rewarded game. And I'll go through some of the code, how it works with Beamable. We do have to do a little bit of config on the Beamable dashboard, such as adding our ZBD API key, etc. Anyway, I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you.